From the outside, Emily and David Turner appeared flawless. Their brick front home stood proudly at the end of a manicured cul-de-sac, where neighbors often slowed their cars just to admire its glowing windows and the warmth spilling from within. Emily liked to think their life reflected stability, comfort, and love. Yet behind the polished glass, not everything shone as it seemed. Emily's voice, soft yet firm, framed the story. I believed in us. In the life we built, I thought David was my forever. Her words carried both conviction and fragility, the sound of a woman clinging to the idea of a marriage already trembling. By day, Emily was a pediatric nurse, known for her patience and gentle presence. David, on the other hand, worked as a financial consultant, confident in rooms filled with numbers and strangers. Together they projected balance, her empathy and his logic, her nurturing and his ambition. To outsiders, theirs was the kind of union that belonged in glossy magazines. Weekend brunches, vacations to the coast, holiday cards that gleamed with curated happiness. But small details hinted at fissures Emily refused to acknowledge. David's kisses grew shorter, his embrace colder, his laughter hollow. He arrived later from work, claiming deadlines or client dinners. Emily noticed but convinced herself it was stress. Marriage, she thought, required patience. She reminded herself of their vows, of the promises whispered in candlelight years before. One evening, she stood at the window with a glass of wine, watching David's car pull into the driveway. His face was shadowed, his smile rehearsed. Long day? She asked, her tone carrying the weight of unspoken doubts. Yeah, just meetings. Know how it is, he muttered, brushing past her with a brief kiss on her temple before retreating upstairs. Emily lingered in the living room, staring at the untouched dinner she had prepared. She told herself he was simply tired, but in the pit of her stomach, unease stirred. The Turners' friends admired their marriage, often envying the perfect couple. At neighborhood barbecues, David wrapped his arm around Emily's waist, his grin wide and convincing. She played along, smiling as if nothing were wrong, though her heart tightened each time she felt his arm stiffen instead of melt into hers. At night, Emily lay awake, listening to David's steady breathing. She whispered prayers into the dark, bargaining with fate. Just let him come back to me. Let us be us again. Her devotion was unwavering, but she sensed David drifting like a boat untethered, carried by currents she could not see. Still, Emily clung to hope. She told herself that love could weather silence, that marriages survived worse. Yet even in those moments of denial, she knew something lurked in the shadows, something unspoken that lived between them. And as the story of their marriage unfolded, the truth would not only shatter Emily's illusions, but unravel their lives in ways no one could imagine. Emily's doubts about David's distance had grown quieter in her mind, buried beneath the rhythm of everyday life. Still, the unease never fully left her. It returned on certain evenings when their doorbell rang, and Ryan stepped into their home as though it belonged to him, too. Ryan Matthews had been David's closest companion since middle school. Where David was composed and methodical, Ryan radiated energy, laughter that filled a room, charm that disarmed strangers, and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Neighbors adored him. Colleagues found him magnetic, and Emily at first had been grateful for his presence. She believed Ryan's friendship kept David grounded, a tether to his past in a world often consumed by corporate ambition. At dinner parties, Ryan's stories stole the spotlight. He recalled their reckless teenage adventures, their nights sneaking out, their victories on the basketball court. Emily laughed along, though sometimes she caught something in David's expression, an intensity in his eyes, a lingering glance toward Ryan that lasted a second too long. She dismissed it as nostalgia, the kind that comes from decades of shared history, but Ryan was always there. Movie nights that were supposed to be intimate turned into gatherings of three. Weekend hikes became less about marital bonding and more about old jokes exchanged between men who seemed locked in a world Emily couldn't penetrate. Even on quiet Sunday mornings, Ryan would drop by unannounced, carrying coffee and bagels, slipping effortlessly into their kitchen like family. Emily occasionally teased David, half playful, half serious. Does Ryan even have his own place, or should I set up a room for him here? David chuckled, deflecting. He's been around forever. He's like a brother. You know that. Emily wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that her husband's loyalty to Ryan was nothing more than friendship. And yet, something about the way Ryan's hand lingered on David's shoulder, the way their laughter quieted when she entered the room, gnawed at her. Still, she silenced her suspicions. It was easier that way. After all, she loved David, and love, she reminded herself, meant faith. But Ryan was not just a friend. Beneath his grin and easy charm, he carried secrets that only David shared, secrets Emily could never imagine. Ryan was not simply visiting out of nostalgia. He was a constant presence because David needed him. Their bond was carved from something deeper, something unspoken that Emily's devotion could not compete with. In time, Emily's patience would unravel, her trust tested against shadows she refused to name. For now, though, she smiled through her unease, welcoming Ryan as part of their lives. She did not know it yet, but his presence would become the very thread that unraveled the Turner marriage. And as the cracks widened, Emily's suspicions would sharpen into something darker, until the truth could no longer be ignored. At first, Emily convinced herself that Ryan's constant presence explained David's distracted mood. She told herself men simply needed their friends, that she should be grateful her husband hadn't drifted toward bars or strangers. But weeks stretched into months, and the coldness in David's touch deepened until it was impossible to ignore. The dinners Emily prepared often sat untouched. David would call an hour after he was due home, claiming a late meeting or a client crisis. When he finally arrived, his shirt would be rumpled, his tie loosened, his excuses practiced but unconvincing. He kissed her forehead out of habit, not affection, and went straight upstairs. Emily lingered at the table, staring at the candle burning low beside plates that remained full. One night she asked softly but firmly, "David, are we okay?" He glanced at her briefly, eyes clouded, then shrugged. "Just tired. Work's been heavy." His tone was flat, his words rehearsed. He didn't stay long enough for her to press further. The silence between them grew heavier. Emily felt it at night, when David rolled to his side, his back to her, as though a wall divided their bed. She heard it in the mornings, when his words were clipped, his eyes darting toward his phone before meeting hers. Emily's narration carried the weight of sorrow. I kept asking myself, was it me? Had I failed him somehow? Or was there something else, something darker, pulling him away from me? Arguments soon replaced their quiet distance. One Friday evening, after yet another late return, Emily's patience fractured. "You missed dinner again," she said sharply, standing in the doorway as he set down his briefcase. David sighed, loosening his tie. "I told you, Em, meetings don't run on your schedule." Her voice cracked. "It's not just dinner, David, it's everything. You don't look at me anymore. You barely talk to me. Where are you really going?" For the first time, David's composure slipped. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed. "You're imagining things. Stop making problems where there aren't any." Gaslighting, gentle at first, then sharper, became his shield. Whenever Emily pressed, David flipped the blame, accusing her of being insecure, clingy, or paranoid. The more he denied, the more she questioned her own instincts. Yet small details betrayed him. A faint trace of cologne that wasn't his. The smell of cigarettes, though David hadn't smoked in years. A receipt crumpled in his pocket for a bar across town, nowhere near his office. Emily's heart ached as she pieced together fragments of a puzzle she couldn't yet see. She wanted to believe in her marriage, in the man who once held her face and swore he would never hurt her. But the stranger sharing her bed no longer felt like the husband she knew. One evening, after another argument ended in slammed doors and silence, Emily stood alone in the kitchen, her hands gripping the counter. The house was quiet, but inside her chest, panic thundered. She whispered to herself, "I'm losing him, but to what?" Her instincts were right. Something bound David elsewhere, something stronger than obligation, stronger than vows. Emily couldn't name it yet, but it pulsed like a shadow creeping into their home, poisoning their bond with every secret he kept. And soon, those secrets would no longer hide in silence. Emily's whispers to herself, "I'm losing him, but to what?" echoed silently in the Turner home, unanswered. David carried those questions like ghosts clinging to his clothes, but he never dared let them slip. He knew if Emily pressed too far, The truth would collapse everything. Because when David wasn't at late-night meetings or trapped in fabricated deadlines, he was with Ryan. Their stolen moments lived in shadows, small, electrifying pieces of a life David craved but couldn't claim. A text buzzing at midnight, "I need to see you." A shared cigarette in the quiet of a deserted parking lot. The brush of Ryan's hand on his knee, lingering too long for friendship. David told himself it was wrong, a mistake he could contain. But when Ryan leaned close, his voice low and teasing, David's resolve fractured. Their late-night drives became a ritual. Windows down, music playing softly, the city lights blurring past as they drove aimlessly. It wasn't the destination that mattered. It was the freedom, the intoxication of being seen, desired, understood. Yet every stolen kiss, every whispered promise carried a shadow of guilt. David would return home afterward, slipping into bed beside Emily, his body heavy with shame. She stirred sometimes, reaching for him, only to find his shoulders tense, his lips cold. Ryan, however, pushed for more. "You can't keep living like this," he said one night, his voice sharp as they sat in his dimly lit apartment. "She doesn't make you happy, I do. Know it." David rubbed his face, exhaustion etched into his features. "You don't understand. Leaving her, it's not that simple. We've built a life. People look at us like we're perfect." Ryan's laugh was bitter. "Perfect? You're miserable. And you're lying to her, lying to yourself. How long do you think you can keep this up?" The truth was, David didn't know. His marriage had become a cage, the walls closing in tighter each day. Yet breaking free meant destroying Emily, shattering the image of the man he had spent years pretending to be. Emily, meanwhile, remained in the dark, sensing only the chill of distance without grasping the storm behind it. She clung to dinners, to forced conversations, to fragile hope. David, sitting across from her at the table, would nod and smile, but inside, guilt and longing twisted until he could hardly breathe. Narration cut deep. Every choice David made was a betrayal. Every silence, every lie, every touch meant for Ryan was another crack in the life he shared with Emily. He wanted freedom. But freedom demanded a cost he wasn't ready to pay. The double life couldn't last. Lies rarely do. And as Ryan's demands grew stronger, and Emily's suspicions sharpened, David's world tightened like a noose. He stood on the edge of exposure, knowing that one more secret text, one more missed dinner, could ignite everything he feared most. And soon, Emily would discover the first undeniable clue. It began with a sound, a sharp buzz against the nightstand as David showered. Emily, curled in bed, reached instinctively for the phone. She told herself she was only checking the time. But when the screen lit up, her breath caught. The message was brief, intimate, and wrong. "I missed last night. When can I see you again?" The sender's name flashed clearly. Ryan. For a moment, Emily sat frozen, the phone trembling in her hand. Her mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was a joke, maybe she had misread. But the words burned with a weight she couldn't dismiss. When David emerged, towel draped over his shoulders, Emily's voice shook. "Why is Ryan texting you things like this?" She held out the phone like evidence in a trial. David's expression faltered for only a fraction of a second. Barely noticeable, but enough. Then his features hardened, mask slipping into place. "You went through my phone?" His tone dripped with accusation, not guilt. Emily's voice rose. "Don't turn this on me!" "What does this mean?" He snatched the phone from her hand, locking it quickly. "It means you're paranoid." Ryan jokes around. "You've always misunderstood his humor." Emily's stomach twisted. That wasn't a joke. That was personal. Too personal. David's jaw clenched. "You're reading into nothing." "God, Emily, do you hear yourself? Snooping through my phone, spinning stories? No wonder I don't talk to you. You twist everything." His words cut deeper than she expected. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had she overreacted? Was she imagining what wasn't there? But the message replayed in her mind, undeniable in its intimacy. That night, they argued until silence became safer than words. David turned away in bed, shoulders rigid while Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her narration carried through the dark. Every time I tried to trust my instincts, he made me question my own sanity. I didn't know if I was losing him, or if I was simply losing myself. days stretched with quiet hostility. Emily tiptoed around the house, unsure which version of David she would face, the calm, dismissive one or the sharp, accusing one. He spoke less, smiled never, and kept his phone clutched to him like a secret she wasn't allowed to touch again. The tension was unbearable, a rope pulled so tight it threatened to snap. Emily longed for truth, but all she met was denial, deflection, and coldness. One evening, while clearing dinner plates, she glanced at David across the table. His eyes flicked to his phone, lighting up with another message. His lips curved ever so slightly, a smile she hadn't seen in months. Not for her, but for someone else. Emily knew then that something was breaking. She couldn't yet name it, couldn't yet prove it. But whatever bound David to Ryan was no longer friendship. And the more he denied, the closer Emily edged toward uncovering the devastating truth. Emily's suspicions lingered like smoke after a fire, seeping into every corner of the Turner household. She tried to ignore them, tried to salvage what remained of her marriage. But each glance at David's guarded phone or his distant smile reminded her that something vital was slipping away. David, meanwhile, lived in constant tension. At home, Emily's eyes followed him with quiet desperation. With Ryan, the air grew heavier, the pressure sharper. One night, Ryan confronted him in the dim light of his apartment. "You can't keep stringing her along," Ryan said, pacing the floor. "You say you love me, but then you run back to her like nothing's wrong. You can't have both." David rubbed his temples, exhaustion etched into his features. "It's not that simple. You don't understand what I stand to lose." Ryan's voice hardened. "No, David, you're the one who doesn't understand. Every second you stay in that house, you're lying, to her and to me." "I won't wait forever." The ultimatum sank like lead in David's chest. He left that night torn, his mind splitting between two lives, the one he had built with Emily and the one he craved with Ryan. At home, Emily noticed the shift. David's hands shook when he poured a drink, his gaze unfocused, his temper flaring without reason. Still, she clung to hope. Over dinner one evening, she tried again. "We can fix this," she whispered. "Whatever it is, David. We can work through it." He looked at her, eyes glassy, then forced a smile. "There's nothing to fix." His words were steady, but his voice betrayed a tremor. Emily's narration cut through. "I thought if I just held on tighter, if I just loved him harder, maybe I could bring him back to me. I didn't realize the harder I pulled, the further he slipped away." The triangle tightened with each passing day. Emily's devotion bound her to the illusion of the husband she once knew. Ryan's passion demanded truth, demanded freedom. And David, caught between loyalty and longing, became increasingly unstable, drowning beneath the weight of his own deception. Something had to give, and it would begin to unravel at a neighborhood gathering, where the truth would flicker dangerously close to the surface. The evening air buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses as neighbors filled the yard of the Turners' closest friends. String lights glowed above, casting a warm illusion of harmony, but beneath the brightness, tension simmered. David stood near the grill, beer in hand, smiling too wide at casual jokes. Emily watched him from across the lawn, her stomach tight. She wanted to believe they were still a couple others admired, but David's eyes betrayed him, darting often, always searching. And Emily noticed exactly who he was searching for. Ryan arrived late, sliding easily into the crowd with his usual charm. Guests gravitated toward him, his charisma magnetic. But Emily's eyes sharpened when she saw the subtle exchange between him and David. A flicker of a smile, an unspoken recognition, the kind of silent language two people share when they're bound by something deeper. As the night unfolded, Emily's unease grew. During a group conversation, Ryan rested his hand briefly on David's back, a casual gesture to others, but Emily caught the way David stiffened, caught between panic and desire. Later, she saw Ryan lean close, whispering into David's ear. David's laugh was too soft, too intimate, and though Emily forced a smile, her chest ached with silent suspicion. Neighbors mingled, oblivious, but Emily noticed the details. The way Ryan's gaze lingered on David a fraction too long, the way David avoided Emily's touch, as though even the simplest gesture might expose him. Each moment built like a stone on her chest, pressing heavier until breathing felt impossible. At one point, Ryan brushed past her, offering a polite grin. But in his eyes, she saw something else, something possessive, a quiet claim he didn't need to voice. When the party wound down, Emily and David walked home in silence. The laughter of neighbors echoed behind them, but their own house felt colder than ever. David retreated upstairs quickly, muttering about exhaustion. Emily lingered in the living room, staring at the half-empty wine glass she'd carried back with her. Her narration broke through the stillness. That night, I couldn't deny it anymore. I saw the way Ryan looked at him, the way David looked back. It wasn't brotherly. It wasn't innocent. And I knew. I had to uncover the truth, no matter how much it broke me. The illusion was shattering. Emily's doubts had hardened into determination, and her search for answers would ignite a confrontation neither of them could escape. The morning after the neighborhood party, Emily woke with a knot in her stomach. Sleep had come in short, restless bursts, each dream replaying Ryan's lingering touches and David's evasive glances. The doubts that once whispered in her mind now screamed like sirens. She needed proof, something undeniable, something that couldn't be explained away. When David left for work, Emily seized her chance. His phone lay charging on the nightstand, still buzzing from late-night messages he had pretended not to notice. Hands trembling, she unlocked it, heart hammering so loudly she feared it would give her away. The evidence appeared within seconds. A thread of messages, hidden under a contact labeled R, glowed like a wound on the screen. Last night I thought about you the whole time. I can't stand hiding anymore. When will you tell her? Emily's chest tightened. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she scrolled further. Photos. Late-night plans disguised as errands. Declarations of love, punctuated with words that left no doubt. David wasn't simply betraying her. He was living another life. By the time David returned home that evening, Emily's fury had boiled over into a dangerous calm. She waited in the kitchen, the phone clutched tightly in her hand. When he walked in offering a distracted hello, she slammed the device onto the counter. "What is this, David?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned. David froze. His gaze flickered to the screen, then back to her. "It's nothing. Just Ryan being—" "Don't you dare," Emily snapped, her voice rising. "Don't you dare lie to me again," the mask cracked. David's shoulders sagged, but instead of apology, anger erupted. "You went through my phone? You had no right." "No right?" Emily's hands trembled as she pointed at the messages. "You've been lying to me, sneaking around with him, destroying our marriage, and you're worried about your privacy?" The argument exploded. Shouted words ricocheted off the walls, each accusation sharper than the last. Emily's voice cracked with betrayal, David's with desperation. Glass shattered as Emily hurled a wine glass against the floor, crimson liquid pooling like spilled blood. "You promised me a life, David," she screamed. "A family, a future." Was it all a lie? David's face twisted, torn between guilt and rage. "I never wanted to hurt you. But I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending." The weight of his words struck Emily harder than the shards at her feet. Pretending. Their marriage. Their years together, their vows. It was all framed as an act. Unable to bear her sobs, David stormed toward the door. "You need air," he muttered, his voice raw. The door slammed shut behind him, rattling the walls. Emily stood alone in the wreckage, glass crunching beneath her feet. Tears blurred her vision. But one thought cut through the haze. She wasn't just losing her husband. She was losing him to Ryan. Outside, David disappeared into the night. His heart torn, his anger consuming him. Inside, Emily collapsed into a chair, the silence heavier than any scream. And somewhere in the distance, the chain of choices none of them could undo had already begun pulling them toward tragedy. The night air was sharp against David's flushed skin as he left the house. His feet carried him on instinct, down familiar streets until he found himself outside Ryan's apartment. His chest heaved, torn between the guilt of Emily's shattered face and the aching pull toward the one person who made him feel alive. Ryan opened the door almost instantly, as if he had been waiting. Relief flashed across his eyes, quickly replaced with something hungrier. He pulled David inside, locking the door behind him. "You're here," Ryan whispered, brushing David's cheek with a trembling hand. "Finally. Tell me it's done. Tell me you've left her." David's heart clenched. I can't. Emily knows. She saw everything. She knows about us. Ryan's expression hardened. Then all the more reason to stop lying. This is our chance, David. We don't have to hide anymore. We can finally be free. But David's head shook violently. You don't understand. She's my wife. My life is built with her. If I leave now, everything collapses. My career, my family, the life I swore to protect, it'll all come crashing down. Ryan stepped closer, his voice sharpening with desperation. What about me? All these years waiting, loving you in silence. Was I just a distraction? A secret you could discard when it got messy? The words hit like daggers. David grabbed Ryan's arm. You are not a mistake. You're the only thing that feels real. But I can't destroy everything else to have you. Ryan's face twisted. The longing in his eyes turned dark, edged with rage. Then you'll destroy me instead. The silence between them fractured, giving way to shouting. David's guilt clashed with Ryan's obsession. Their voices rose, echoes bouncing off the walls of the cramped apartment. A shove, a desperate grab, a fist connecting. David staggered back, his breath ragged. Stop, Ryan. Please, just stop. But Ryan's fury boiled over. He lunged, and in the chaos the struggle turned violent. Hands grasped for dominance, for control, for survival. Then it happened. A sickening crack, followed by the thud of a body hitting the floor. David froze, chest heaving, staring at Ryan sprawled on the ground. Blood seeped from the corner of his head, pooling across the wooden floorboards. The world went silent. Only David's pulse thundered in his ears as he sank to his knees, trembling. His love, his secret, his undoing, lying motionless before him. In the quiet aftermath, David whispered through broken sobs, "What have I done?" Outside, the city carried on, unaware that inside this small apartment, love had turned into something monstrous, irreversible, deadly. And as David stared at Ryan's still body, one truth became clear. There was no turning back now. The shrill ring of Emily's phone shattered the fragile silence of midnight. She had been sitting at the kitchen table for hours, staring at the broken glass still scattered on the floor, waiting for David to return. When the unknown number flashed across her screen, a cold dread crawled through her veins. "Mrs. Bennett," a clipped voice asked when she answered. "This is Officer Daniels with the city police. You need to come down to 48th Street. There's been an incident." Emily's stomach dropped. She pressed for details, but the officer gave none, only urging her to come immediately. Her hands shook as she grabbed her keys. Something deep inside her already knew this wasn't about a stranger. It was about David. The drive blurred past in fragments of red lights and hollow breaths. By the time she turned the corner onto Ryan's street, the glow of sirens painted the night in violent flashes of blue and red. A crowd had gathered behind police tape, murmuring in hushed shock. Emily pushed through, heart pounding. Her eyes darted across the scene, paramedics wheeling out a stretcher draped in a white sheet, detectives huddled near the doorway, and then, in the center of it all, David. He stood cuffed between two officers, head bowed, his shirt stained dark with blood. "No." The word tore from Emily's throat before she could stop it. She stumbled forward, but an officer caught her by the arm. "Ma'am, you can't go in there," he said firmly. "What happened? Please, what's going on?" The officer's gaze softened, though his voice remained steady. "There was a domestic altercation. One man is deceased. Your husband was found at the scene." Emily's eyes widened, darting between the covered body on the stretcher and David's ashen face. The pieces slammed together in her mind with sickening clarity. Ryan, the texts, the party, the betrayal, and now this. David finally lifted his eyes to hers. They were wild, broken, pleading for something she couldn't give. His lips moved silently, an apology, a desperate cry. But no sound reached her. Emily's breath caught, her body swaying under the weight of it all. This was the man she had built her life with, the man she had defended, loved, and fought for. Yet here he was, shackled in steel, his lies laid bare under the harsh glare of police lights. A detective approached her quietly. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm sorry you had to see this. Your husband will be taken in for questioning. We'll need you to come by tomorrow to give a statement." Emily nodded numbly, though her mind screamed. She couldn't tear her gaze from David as the officers led him toward the waiting cruiser. Each step he took echoed like a nail sealing the coffin of the life they once shared. As the car door slammed shut, Emily wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the summer air. In that moment, she understood with painful clarity, secrets don't just ruin marriages, they bury lives. And tonight, hers had been buried with Ryan's. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, a place where lives were stripped bare under oath. For Emily, walking into that chamber felt like stepping onto a stage she had never auditioned for. Rows of strangers filled the benches, their eyes fixed on the man she once called her husband. David sat at the defense table, thinner now, his suit hanging loose on his frame. His hands trembled as he shuffled papers, chains clinking faintly whenever he shifted. When his eyes met Emily's across the room, a flicker of recognition passed between them. Not love, not even regret, but something rawer, the weight of shared destruction. The prosecutor painted the scene in brutal detail, the affair, the fight, the blood. Each word twisted the knife deeper. Emily wanted to close her ears, but the truth clung to every corner of the room. When her turn came to testify, her legs nearly buckled beneath her. She raised her hand, swore to tell the truth, and sat down, palms sweating against the polished wood. "Mrs. Bennett," the prosecutor began, "did you suspect your husband was engaged in a relationship with Mr. Ryan Caldwell?" Emily's voice cracked. "Yes, I found messages. Confronted him. Did he ever admit it to you?" Tears blurred her vision, not in words, but everything else. The distance, the lies. "I knew." The defense attorney pressed her harder, trying to twist her grief into weakness. "Mrs. Bennett, isn't it true that your marriage had cracks long before Mr. Caldwell?" Emily's jaw tightened. "Every marriage has cracks, but he chose to fill his with secrets." The words hung in the air like a verdict of their own. Finally, it was David's turn. He rose slowly, shackles rattling, and faced the courtroom. His voice was hoarse but steady. "I loved Ryan," he said, the confession reverberating through the chamber. "I loved him for years, but I was a coward. I thought I could have both. A perfect marriage, the perfect image, and the man who made me feel alive. When Emily found out, I panicked. When Ryan pushed me to choose, I snapped." His eyes brimmed with tears as he spoke. "I never meant to kill him. I just couldn't carry the weight anymore. The lies, the fear, they crushed me until I became something I didn't recognize." The courtroom was silent, breathless. Emily sat rigid, every syllable cutting her deeper. The man she once thought she knew was gone, replaced by someone who had been hiding all along. No verdict could change that. No sentence could undo what secrets had destroyed. The house was quieter than Emily ever remembered. The laughter that once filled the living room, the routine sounds of clinking glasses and David's footsteps on the stairs, all gone. What remained was a silence so heavy it pressed against her chest like a weight she could never push away. She sat at the dining table, staring at the faint scratch marks in the wood where David once drummed his fingers absent-mindedly. The trial was over, the verdict delivered. David would spend decades behind bars, a hollowed man whose truth had come too late. Ryan was gone forever, reduced to a framed photograph his grieving family clutched in court. And Emily? She was left with the ashes of a life she once thought was picture-perfect. For weeks, neighbors had whispered about her as she passed by, pity in their eyes, curiosity on their tongues. The woman whose husband had been living a double life. The wife who never really knew the man she shared a bed with. Their voices stung less than her own. In the stillness of night, Emily replayed every moment, every smile David had given her, every excuse she'd accepted without question. She realized now that their marriage had been a performance, an illusion carefully staged for the world. She had mistaken security for love, loyalty for devotion, but what David had truly given her was silence. The silence of things he never said. The silence of truths buried too deep. Her mind often returned to Ryan. He had been painted as a threat, a lover who dared to demand honesty, but beneath it all, he was just a man who wanted to be loved openly. Emily had hated him once, jealous of his hold on David. But in the end, she pitied him too. He had died for a love that could never survive in the light. Walking through the house, Emily touched the photographs still hanging on the walls, smiling vacations, anniversaries, staged perfection. She felt no connection to the woman in those pictures. That Emily had been blind, devoted to a dream. This Emily stood alone, stripped of illusions, staring into the harsh truth. On quiet nights when the wind rattled the windows, she sometimes thought she heard whispers, David's apologies, Ryan's pleas, her own doubts echoing back to her. But she knew they were only ghosts, remnants of secrets that had destroyed them all. She returned to the dining table and whispered to the empty room. It was never love. Not really. Her words hung in the air, fragile yet final, because in the end she realized it wasn't passion or violence that had destroyed her marriage. It was silence. The silence of unspoken truths. The silence of a man too afraid to live honestly. The silence of a woman who had convinced herself to believe in his lies. And as Emily closed her eyes, the truth settled in her bones. Sometimes the deadliest lies aren't screamed in anger, but whispered gently between husband and wife.